With Andrew Stein from New York City. Hi, Andrew, and if you could tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I'm here on a number of different bases these days. The first is I'm on the International Advisory Board for Counterpart International, which is a very large NGO supporting all types of operations throughout the world, one of their main programs being sustainable tourism. The other is I represent the private sector. I finance and help get equity and debt for high-end hotels throughout the world. So the goal of this conference is to really marry the two. Marry the high-end tourism with high-end sustainable development and see if I can make those connections while I'm here.
We're at the last part of the conference. How did it go?
We are. I think it went extremely well. I think one of the things that I feel is a little underrepresented here is the private sector. There's a lot of public sector. There's some smaller operators, but none of the larger Four Seasons of the world are represented here to kind of take a look at what's going on in this world. What I'm hoping to bring back is a lot of the experiences, a lot of the contacts that I've made here, and bring those contacts and bring that information to bear on the more established tour operators, more established high-end hotel operators. And then there's some new hotel operators that are developing now that have a green bent to them. Try to get them involved in some of the concepts that I've learned here this week.
It's interesting you say that because a couple of thoughts come to my mind. One is Chiang Mai, Thailand,
Sure.
where some people are telling me the new five-star hotels, there's about 4 or 5 that opened there,
Right.
and they're now there without any activities for their five-star clients.
And it's very true. And actually, I know one of the developers who opened up one of those new properties in Chiang Mai. And it's interesting because we had that conversation, and I'll be calling one of those developers after this conference. Because a lot of times they'll go into a great site. Chiang Mai is a wonderful area. I love it very much. But not have the sustainable tourism and the ecotourism product that many of their clients are looking for. So I think from this conference, one of the things I'm gaining is some of the experience on how, on a smaller scale, some of the operators have worked on that. Brought that. You find most of the high-end tourists these days are looking for a natural experience or looking for an experiential experience, if that makes sense. But anyway, they're looking to have something that's related to the region they're going. And if that's offered and it's done in a sustainable way, I think that's what I'm hoping to gain from the conference.
Counterpart International, and I see the CEO, Laile, passing by here. Got to grab him. Tell us a little bit about some of the projects it's undertaking now.
Well, Lele is a whole lot better at that than I am, so I think I'll leave that to him to discuss. But my specific focus is really going to be on sustainable tourism, looking at areas, maybe even some areas off the beaten path. One of the areas we're looking at is Ethiopia, for instance. Developing tourism in spots where I can hopefully bring some of the high-end tour operators that haven't or may have been thinking of some of these spots and bring them into the Counterpart family. But Lele can talk about all of the other wonderful programs that they do.
Let's talk about Ethiopia for a moment. They were just hosting the African Travel Association Conference. Lucy's on the road,
All right.
visiting
Absolutely.
USA. And they have 400 kilometers of new roads from Chinese money in the last 18 months.
They do indeed. And it's interesting. I think there's always been the issue of warfare and everything else that's played on people's mind. And security, of course, is one of the primary drivers for tourism. I think that's the one issue that has abated over the recent years that has allowed a lot of this development to go on. But now that you have the development and you have the new infrastructure in place, the next is getting it to be a high-end tourist destination. Looking at the parks and how you can have a sustainable development tourism program within the parks. And that's one of the things I think we're going to look at with Counterpart together with some of my contacts as well to try to get that development going.
You're still looking at it, or have you come to a conclusion that, yes, the time is right to get development going in the luxury level?
This conference is a lot of looking at. I guess I've come at more the timing is right, that I think you are looking at in the next year to 2 years having developments underway. Obviously, it takes a good 18 months to build one of these things, but I think you do see within the next 2 years, I think you see that type of development coming to Ethiopia as well.
When we talk about luxury accommodations, various things come to mind: Fairmonts, Ritz-Carlton, and then we have the kind of more boutique type of things, Como, Banyan Tree, and such. Where is that luxury going? Both are growing?
Well, both are growing tremendously. I think the sector that's growing the highest, quite frankly, is more the boutique hotel, because they can be a little more agile. They can go into different places where you don't need 200 beds. The difference between a boutique and a high-end Four Seasons is really number of rooms rather than type of service. Except for the fact that at a boutique hotel you can, quite frankly, throw a few more people at your guests when you only have 80 or 90 rooms or 45 rooms to deal with. But I've been in discussions with Banyan Tree, with Aman, as well as with Mandarin Oriental and Orient Express, that are all actively developing and are actively looking for newer places and places that people want to go. They just don't have hospitality options available to them.
Do you see any migration from the boutiques to the traditional luxury or vice versa?
A little bit more vice versa. I think you're seeing that the experience of tourism from the high-end traveler is really what is being desired these days. Now, again, you need to have opportunities for families and things like that, but that's what's being taken into account by the Banyan Trees and the Amans these days. But yeah, you are seeing people who want to have the experience of being a part of the land that they're going to, as opposed to just staying in another Ritz-Carlton and seeing the hunting pictures on the wall.
To what extent is the investment money looking at the profit and loss of the hospitality enterprise versus at the increase in value of their real estate investment nowadays?
The bottom line is always important. I mean, that is, most of these are public corporations that are looking for quarterly income. That being said, I think many of the leaders of these firms now are taking a longer-term view of their investments. The increase in real estate values has obviously come into play, but many of the operators aren't the sole investors or even aren't the primary investors in these hotels. You actually have a local sponsor or an international sponsor that will put up the money, and the operators will put in at most 5, 10, 15%. So the operators are really looking at places that are sustainable for their brand and that will increase the value of their brand. The sponsors themselves and the individual projects are obviously looking for the returns. But there's been a very good marriage these days of having the two of them together. I think we're being called back, but having the two work hand in hand, where you have the returns, the finances work. And then there's also, we can talk another time about the financial aspect of having the banks support that development going forward.
Last question relates to innovation and networking between the travel sector and cross-sector stakeholders of travel and tourism. What I mean is, generally, the travel sector hangs out together: hotel, restaurants, airline, tour operators, and such. Sure. But whether it be transportation, construction, security, petrochemical, et cetera, all make a good chunk of money from tourism. Is there enough interaction, or there needs to be more?
No, there absolutely has to be more. I think the Lay had a program earlier in the conference talking about the highways in the sky, that a great deal of money is spent on infrastructure, supporting roads, bridges, tunnels, to places that may not be economically viable, but governments support it. Well, a lot of these places that you need to go to that we want to develop sustainably are in places you really only get to by air. But those routes don't make financial sense for whatever airline is making those routes. So the example I would use is that when governments, and they're starting to see it, but not nearly enough, start to see that in order to increase tourism to an area that's normally not accessible, is building up that airport routing. A great example is Liberia in Guanacaste in Costa Rica, where Four Seasons obviously did a great deal in supporting the development of that airport, but now a tremendous lift goes into that airport, and the entire area of Guanacaste is, one would argue, being overbuilt, but is obviously getting tremendous amount of influx of investment.
And where is Andrew looking at nowadays in terms of destinations? You mentioned Ethiopia.
I think I'm more of a Latin specialist by background, so I'm actually looking heavily into Central America, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras. Panama is a tremendously growing area right now. Costa Rica, obviously, but parts of Costa Rica that aren't being as heavily developed as Guanacaste. So Brazil, the northeast of Brazil, is a tremendously viable opportunity for what's going on right now.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
My pleasure.